Hey there. Welcome to this deep dive, into the world of Jordan Peterson and what he calls the architecture of belief. We're going to be looking at maps of meaning, trying to figure out what this clinical psychologist, what he has to say about, um, I guess, how humans create order out of chaos and ultimately how our beliefs, not only shape the way we see the world, but the way we act in it.
What's so interesting about Peterson's work is he kind of starts with like his own personal struggle. There was a point in his life where his belief system just completely shattered.
Yeah, he talks about like this moment during university where he was trying to reconcile the ideologies he was studying, but then you have like the Cold War going on, the threat of nuclear annihilation. Yeah.
Exactly. He's grappling with political science, trying to figure out like, who's good and who's bad. And then boom, like the potential for like global destruction is just kind of like hanging over everything.
Yeah, I bet that would make you question everything. Does he like talk about what that felt like?
He described it as like, feeling lost, like the map he was using to navigate the world was suddenly full of holes. It's almost like, you're trying to follow a recipe, but all the measurements are like blurred, you know? How do you even begin to like make sense of things, let alone decide what's right and wrong when your entire framework for understanding is like crumbling?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I can see how that kind of experience would push someone to really search for deeper meaning, some a more solid foundation to kind of
Yeah.
like build their understanding of the world on. And I guess that's where all the dreams and mythology and Jungian psychology comes in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Peterson became like obsessed with this idea that, the world isn't just a collection of things that we can just objectively like observe and measure. It's also like this stage for action. It's like a drama that unfolds through stories and myths. And he realized these stories aren't just like entertainment, they're actually like a way for humans to grapple with the deepest questions of existence: good versus evil, order versus chaos, the meaning of life, like the nature of reality itself.
So instead of just looking at the world through the lens of science, he started to consider like the wisdom contained in these like ancient myths and stories. That's a pretty big a shift in perspective.
Right, and that's where it gets really interesting. Peterson argues that we all have these like internal maps, like mental models, that guide our behavior and help us navigate the world. But these maps are constantly being challenged by what he calls the unknown.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
Tell me more about these maps and the unknown. What does that even like mean? What does that look like in practical terms?
Well, imagine you're driving to a friend's house, right? You have a map, you know the route, you're feeling pretty confident. But then you hit a detour. Road closed, construction, whatever. That's what Peterson calls a quote unquote normal encounter with the unknown.
Okay, so like a minor inconvenience,
Yeah.
just a slight deviation from the plan.
Right. You might feel a bit frustrated, but you can adjust, figure out a new route.
Yeah.
But now imagine this. You're in your office building, you're heading to a meeting, suddenly the fire alarm goes off, the lights flicker, you find yourself like trapped in a smoke-filled stairwell with no way out. That's a revolutionary encounter with the unknown.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah.
That escalated quickly.
Yeah.
It's like a totally different level of like unexpected. It's not just a detour. It's like a complete upheaval of your sense of order and security.
Right.
That sounds terrifying.
It can be. And that's Peterson's point. Those moments when our maps fail us, when we're confronted with the unexpected and chaotic, those are the moments that really test us. They force us to confront like our deepest fears, our assumptions about the world, and ultimately, our beliefs about who we are and what we're capable of.
So how do we handle those revolutionary encounters? Do we just like panic and give in to the chaos?
That's where things get really interesting and where Peterson dives into like the way our brains are wired,
Yeah.
to respond to these kinds of situations. He talks about how like our brains are actually designed for both approach, which is driven by hope and curiosity, but also withdrawal, which is fueled by fear and anxiety when we're faced with novelty.
Okay, so it's like we have these two like competing instincts, one pulling us towards the unknown and the other one like urging us to run away from it.
Precisely. Think about a time when, maybe you had to give a presentation in front of a large audience. Do you remember how you felt? Probably a mix of like excitement and nervousness, right?
Oh yeah,
That's the approach, and withdrawal systems kind of at play.
yeah, yeah. The excitement of the challenge, like the possibility of doing well, but also the fear of, messing up, of being judged.
Right.
Makes sense. But how does that relate to our belief systems?
Well, Peterson believes that how we navigate those encounters with the unknown, how we balance that tension between hope and fear, is deeply influenced by the beliefs we hold, the stories we tell ourselves about the world and our place in it.
So our beliefs are like a compass, kind of like guiding us through the chaotic terrain of life.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
Yeah, and the more robust and adaptable our beliefs are, the better equipped we'll be to handle those moments, those inevitable moments when the unexpected kind of throws us off course.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But how do we develop those kinds of adaptable beliefs? It's not like we're born with a complete set of instructions on, how to navigate the world.
This is where Peterson's distinction between knowing how and knowing what becomes really important.
Okay.
Knowing how is about skills, practical knowledge. It's like knowing how to ride a bike or bake a cake.
Okay, so knowing how is like the doing part, the action part. What about knowing what?
Knowing what is more about like understanding concepts, like having a mental model of how things work.
Yeah.
It's like understanding, the rules of traffic
Mhm.
or having a map of a city.
So it's like the knowledge that informs our actions, the framework that helps us make sense of the world.
Exactly. And Peterson emphasizes that both types of knowledge are essential for navigating the unknown. We need like practical skills to deal with concrete challenges, but we also need a deeper understanding of the world, to guide our actions and to help us make sense of the unexpected.
So it's not just about like knowing how to do things, but also about understanding like why we're doing them and what the consequences might be.
Precisely. And this brings us back to the importance of beliefs,
Yeah.
Our beliefs provide us with that framework for interpreting the world, for making decisions, for
Mhm.
choosing our actions. They help us distinguish between, right and wrong, good and evil, and to kind of orient ourselves in a world that can often feel like chaotic and overwhelming.
Yeah. So our beliefs aren't just these like abstract ideas. They have a real like tangible impact on how we live our lives and, how we interact with the world around us.
Absolutely. And this is why it's so important to like examine our beliefs, to question our assumptions, and to be willing to kind of update our maps as we encounter new information and experiences.
Otherwise, we risk getting stuck with these like outdated maps that no longer serve us,
Right.
leading us astray in a world that's like constantly changing.
Yeah.
And that's where things can get really dangerous, right?
That's right. Because clinging to outdated beliefs can lead us to make, poor decisions, to miss opportunities, and even to harm ourselves or others.
It's like trying to navigate a modern city using a map from the 1800s.
Exactly.
You might end up somewhere, but it's unlikely to be where you intended to go.
Right. And this is where Peterson's, exploration of ancient myths becomes particularly relevant. He argues that these myths offer us like these timeless insights into the human condition,
Okay.
including the dangers of clinging to outdated beliefs and the importance of being willing to adapt and change.
I'm really curious to hear more about that. How do these like ancient myths connect to like our modern lives and our beliefs?
Well, let's dive into some of those myths and see what they can teach us. Are you ready to like explore some ancient wisdom?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay.
Okay, so we're about to journey back in time to the world of ancient myths. Where do you think we should start?
Well, Peterson, he spends a lot of time unpacking this Sumerian creation myth, the Enuma Elish.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of it?
Vaguely, it rings a bell, but I could definitely use a refresher.
Yeah, it's a wild story. It's full of like gods and monsters and, these epic battles. And it all starts with this like primordial chaos represented by these two powerful deities, Apsu and Tiamat.
Apsu and Tiamat. Those names sound like familiar, but I'm drawing a blank on what they actually represent.
Yeah, so Apsu is like the god of fresh water, and Tiamat is this monstrous dragon-like goddess of salt water. They're these like primal forces constantly churning and clashing, It's
Yeah.
the chaotic soup of creation before like the universe as we know it existed.
Okay, so like chaos personified.
Yeah.
Where do humans come in?
Well, not so fast. First, we need a hero. Enter Marduk, this young god who steps up to confront Tiamat and bring order to the cosmos.
Okay, a classic like hero's journey. So Marduk is like basically the universe's first warrior, facing down the ultimate like dragon.
Exactly. He's this archetype of the hero who, like, ventures into the unknown, confronts the forces of chaos, and establishes order. And it's through this epic battle that the world as we know it is created. The heavens and the earth are formed from Tiamat's slain body, and humans are created from the blood of her consort, Kingu.
Whoa, that's intense. It's like This myth is saying that creation itself arises from this like struggle between order and chaos,
Right.
and that the hero's role is to like confront that chaos and impose order on it.
Precisely. And that theme, that battle between order and chaos, it's echoed in so many ancient myths. Like, take the Egyptian story of Osiris, for example. He's this god who brings civilization and agriculture to Egypt.
Okay.
But he's murdered by his jealous brother Seth, who represents the forces of, like, chaos and
So
violence.
Osiris is kind of like the Egyptian version of Marduk, bringing like order and civilization, and Seth is the embodiment of chaos, like trying to disrupt that order.
Exactly. But the story doesn't end there. Osiris's son, Horus, this like falcon-headed god, rises up to avenge his father and defeats Seth, restoring order to the kingdom.
So again, we have this theme of the hero confronting the forces of chaos and ultimately prevailing, right? It's like these ancient cultures were trying to grapple with this like this fundamental tension between order and chaos that we still like deal with today.
Absolutely. And Peterson argues that these myths aren't just like ancient stories, they're like psychological blueprints. They're maps for navigating the complexities of life. They remind us that the unknown is always out there, that chaos can erupt at any moment. But they also they offer us hope. They show us that it's possible to like confront the darkness, to overcome adversity, and to create meaning and order, in the face of chaos.
That's a really powerful message. But how does this all like connect to our own lives, to our own belief systems? I mean, are you saying we should all be like Marduk or Horus, like going out and slaying dragons?
Not literally, of course. But Peterson argues that, each of us has our own inner dragons to slay, our own like internal battles to fight.
Yeah.
And that the real battleground isn't like out there in the world, but within ourselves.
So it's about like confronting our own fears, our own limitations, our own like tendencies towards, chaos and self-destruction.
Exactly. Think of it this way. You mentioned that, map analogy earlier.
Yeah.
Imagine you're on a road trip and you have this old, tattered map that you've been using for years.
Oh,
It's
boy.
gotten you this far, but it's full of like wrong turns and dead ends.
Right.
And you're clinging to it, refusing to let go, even though you know it's not serving you anymore.
Okay. Yeah, I can see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
That map represents like our outdated beliefs,
Yeah.
the ones that might have worked for us in the past, but are now kind of holding us back.
Exactly. And just like clinging to that old map will like keep you from reaching your destination.
Yeah.
Clinging to outdated beliefs can prevent us from like growing, from evolving, from reaching our full potential.
So how do we know when it's time to, to let go of those old maps, those outdated beliefs? That's got to be tough.
It is. But Peterson offers some clues. He talks about this idea of like the adversary,
Yeah.
the figure in mythology who represents resistance to change, who clings to the old ways even when they're no longer serving them.
Great.
Think of like Seth, the god of chaos in Egyptian mythology, or Tiamat, the dragon goddess from the Enuma Elish. They're both like powerful figures, but their refusal to adapt ultimately leads to their downfall.
So the adversary represents like that part of ourselves that's like afraid of change, that's clinging to like the familiar,
Right.
even if it's not like healthy or helpful.
Exactly.
And we need to be aware of that resistance within ourselves if we want to like grow and evolve.
Precisely. Peterson argues that the real hero's journey isn't about slaying external dragons. It's about confronting that inner adversary, that voice of fear and resistance that tells us to like stay small, to play it safe, to avoid the unknown at all costs.
So it's about having the courage to, to question our own beliefs, to challenge our assumptions, and be willing to like let go of what no longer serves us, even if it feels scary.
Precisely. And that brings us to one of Peterson's, I think, most profound insights. He argues that this process of confronting the unknown, of battling our inner adversaries, is actually what makes us human. It's what allows us to grow, to learn, and to create like meaning in our lives.
So the unknown isn't just like something to be feared. It's also like a source of opportunity, a catalyst for, growth and transformation.
Exactly. Peterson believes that the unknown is where we find our true potential. It's where we discover our strengths, our resilience, and our capacity for, creativity and innovation.
That's a really empowering idea, but, I have to admit, it's also a bit daunting. How do we like even begin to approach the unknown, to embrace like the uncertainty and the challenges it like inevitably brings? It's like he's asking us to like step off a cliff and trust that we'll like figure out how to fly on the way down.
Yeah, it can feel that way sometimes. Absolutely. But Peterson, he offers some guidance. He talks about the importance of self-knowledge, of, understanding our own strengths and weaknesses, our values and beliefs. And he emphasizes the importance of like developing a set of virtues, courage, discipline, humility, integrity, that can help us navigate the complexities of life.
So it's about like building this like solid foundation within ourselves,
Yeah.
so we can like venture out into the unknown with a sense of confidence and purpose, knowing that we have the inner resources to handle whatever, challenges come our way.
Precisely. It's like preparing for a long journey, right? You
Yeah.
pack your bags with the essentials, you make sure your vehicle is in good working order, you study the map. Yeah.
But you also know that no matter how well you prepare, there will be unexpected detours, unforeseen challenges, and moments where you'll have to like rely on your instincts and your inner strength to find your way.
That's a great analogy. So it's not about like eliminating uncertainty altogether, right?
Yeah.
It's about developing the tools and the mindset to, navigate uncertainty effectively, to see it not as a threat, but as like an opportunity for, growth and discovery.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of Peterson's like most compelling stories, an analogy he uses to illustrate the dangers of like clinging to what we know,
Okay.
even if it seems like valuable or secure.
Okay.
Have you ever heard like his story about the man who finds the giant ruby?
I don't think so. Tell me more.
Okay, so imagine this. A man is like wandering in the wilderness and he stumbles upon this massive, flawless ruby, like the most valuable gem anyone has ever seen, right?
Yeah.
He's ecstatic, of course. This ruby could like solve all his problems, bring him wealth and security beyond his wildest dreams.
Yeah.
Sounds like he hit the jackpot.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing there's a catch.
There is. You see, this man becomes so like fixated on this ruby,
Okay.
so afraid of losing it, that he isolates himself from the world. He builds a fortress around it, stops trusting anyone, and dedicates his entire life to like guarding this treasure.
So instead of using the ruby to like enrich his life, to connect with others, to like experience the world, he ends up like trapped by it, consumed by like fear and paranoia.
Exactly. And that's Peterson's point. You see, the ruby represents, anything we cling to, beliefs, possessions, ideologies that we believe will like bring us security and happiness, but that ultimately end up like isolating us and preventing us from living a, full and meaningful life.
It's like that saying, the only constant is change. If we're not careful, our attachment to what we know, what feels like safe and familiar, can kind of blind us to new possibilities and trap us in a cycle of fear and like stagnation.
That's it, exactly. And that's why Peterson emphasizes the importance of, like the ancient Greeks would say, knowing thyself, right?
Yeah.
Understanding our own motivations, our own, fears and desires. He quotes the ancient Greek aphorism, the unexamined life is not worth living.
So it's not just about like confronting the unknown out there in the world.
Right.
It's also about like facing the unknown within ourselves.
Yeah.
About being willing to like look inward and to honestly assess like who we are and what we truly value.
Precisely. And that, that requires courage because it means, facing our own shadows, the parts of ourselves that we might be like ashamed of or afraid to acknowledge.
Well, this is getting deep. We're talking about some serious self-reflection here.
We are. But
Yeah.
Peterson believes that this kind of self-reflection is like essential for growth and transformation.
Right.
He argues that if we're not willing to like face our own darkness,
Yeah.
we're more likely to project it onto others, to see the world as like, a hostile and threatening place.
Yeah.
And to make choices that ultimately harm ourselves and those around us.
So it's about like taking responsibility for our own inner world
Yeah.
so that we can like show up in the outer world with more clarity, with more compassion, with more like courage.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately, I think what Peterson's work is all about.
Yeah.
Empowering us to become more conscious, more self-aware, and more responsible for, our own lives and our impact on the world around us.
This has been incredibly insightful. I'm starting to see how like all these ancient myths and, Peterson's ideas about the unknown, the hero's journey, and like the importance of self-knowledge, they're all kind of like interconnected.
Right.
But I'm still wondering, like, how does this translate into practical action? How do we actually like cultivate these virtues, confront our inner adversaries, and embrace the unknown in a way that leads to a more like, meaningful and fulfilling life?
Those are great questions. And I think that's where we should head next. Are you ready to like explore some practical strategies for putting these ideas into action?
Absolutely. Lead the way. All right, so we've talked about, slaying inner dragons and confronting our own shadows.
Yeah, and we've explored this idea that these personal journeys are actually reflections of a much larger story.
The story of humanity grappling with the unknown and trying to make sense of chaos.
And Peterson argues that this struggle isn't just, reflected in our personal lives, it's actually woven into the very fabric of our societies and our cultures.
Okay.
He uses the example of like ancient rituals like the Mesopotamian Akitu festival, which, reenacted the creation myth.
The one where Marduk battles Tiamat?
That's the one. During the festival, the king would symbolically like embody Marduk,
Yeah.
confronting the forces of chaos and restoring order to the kingdom.
It's fascinating how these rituals connected people to their myths and reinforced their shared values, you know.
Exactly. It was a way to like remind everyone of their place in the cosmos and the importance of like upholding the traditions that protected them from the dangers of chaos.
And it's interesting to think about how that same impulse is still at work today,
Oh, yeah.
even though our rituals might look different.
Yeah.
Think about our legal systems, our institutions, our art and literature.
Right.
They all reflect our ongoing attempt to grapple with the unknown, to establish order and to create a sense of meaning and purpose.
It's like we're constantly like rewriting the creation myth, adapting it to our current circumstances.
And Peterson, he even draws a parallel between the individual's journey of confronting the unknown
Right.
and the historical development of scientific thought.
Yeah.
He talks about the alchemists and their quest to transform base metals into gold.
Right.
Weren't they considered kind of mystical and even a bit misguided?
Well, yeah. Yes and no, I guess. Peterson argues that, even though their methods were often flawed and their goals ultimately unattainable,
Yeah.
their relentless experimentation and observation actually laid the groundwork for modern science.
So even though they were working within a flawed framework,
Right.
their pursuit of the unknown, their willingness to challenge conventional wisdom was ultimately a step in the right direction.
Exactly. And you can see that same spirit of exploration at work in, some of the greatest scientific discoveries, from
Yeah.
Newton's laws of motion to Einstein's theory of relativity.
It's each new discovery, it expands the realm of the known and pushes back the boundaries of the unknown.
But even with all our, scientific advancements, there's still so much we don't understand.
And that vastness of the unknown, it keeps us humble, keeps us, searching for deeper understanding.
It's like the unknown is both a source of fear and a source of inspiration.
It reminds me of the story of Adam and Eve being tempted by the serpent to eat from the tree of knowledge.
Ah, yeah. The serpent representing, the allure of the unknown, the desire to transcend our
But
limitations.
then they get banished from paradise, condemned to a life of toil and suffering.
Right. But Peterson offers a different interpretation. He suggests that it's a cautionary tale about the dangers of seeking knowledge without wisdom.
So it's not about rejecting knowledge altogether,
Yeah.
but about approaching the unknown with humility and recognizing, the limits of our understanding.
He suggests that the real path to knowledge is not through domination and control,
Yeah.
but through careful observation, experimentation, and a willingness to be surprised by what we find.
It's we need to become more like gardeners, tending to the soil, nurturing the conditions for growth and discovery.
Rather than engineers trying to impose our will on the natural world.
Yeah. I love that analogy. And it brings us back to the importance of self-knowledge.
If we're not aware of our own biases and blind spots, we're more likely to misinterpret the world around us and
Yeah.
make decisions that ultimately lead to, suffering.
Peterson's pretty emphatic about this whole shadow self idea,
Yeah.
the parts of ourselves we'd rather not acknowledge, the anger, the resentment, the capacity for cruelty.
Yeah.
He's not suggesting we indulge those impulses, right?
Absolutely not. He argues that we need to confront these, shadow aspects, not to give them free rein,
Right.
but to understand them, to
Right.
integrate them into our conscious awareness.
So it's like shining a light into the darkest corners of our psyche so we can see what's there and take responsibility for it.
And, that's a difficult process. It requires, honesty, courage, and a willingness to face our own imperfections.
Yeah. For sure.
But, ultimately, it's the only way to become whole, integrated individuals. Peterson challenges us to ask ourselves, what are the things I'm afraid to admit about myself? What am I clinging to that's holding me back, you know?
He suggests that we might find the answers in our dreams, our relationships, like the recurring patterns in our lives.
Right, those patterns that keep tripping us up, you know, the things
Yeah.
that cause us pain or frustration.
Yeah.
And once we see those things clearly, we can start to make different choices, you know, we can start to break free from those self-defeating patterns.
It's not about like blaming ourselves or getting lost in self-criticism.
No.
It's about like cultivating self-awareness so that we
Like,
can, act with more intention and wisdom.
this has been an incredible journey.
It really
You know,
is.
we've covered so much ground from, the nature of belief systems and the role of the unknown
Yeah.
to the importance of self-knowledge and confronting our shadow selves.
And it all comes back to that, fundamental human struggle to create meaning and order in the face of chaos.
Yeah.
Peterson leaves us with like a really powerful challenge.
You know, what if it was nothing but our self-deceit, our cowardice, our hatred and fear that pollutes our experience and turns the world into hell? You know,
Wow.
why can't we make the experiment and find out if it's true?
That's a question that each of us has to, grapple with in our own way.
But the invitation here is clear, to take responsibility for our own lives, to cultivate the virtues of courage, humility, and compassion.
And to recognize that that the unknown, you know, even though it can be like scary,
Yeah.
it's also the source of all growth, all creativity, all meaning.
It's a journey worth taking, even if it's not always easy. And who knows what we might discover along the way.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Jordan Peterson's Maps of Meaning. We hope you found it insightful and maybe even a little bit challenging.
Remember, the insights we've explored today, they're just the beginning. The real journey starts when you take these ideas and apply them to your own life.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep striving to create a more meaningful and fulfilling life for yourself and for the world around you.